Hello, everyone. My name is Corey Sanchez-Smith. I am the owner of Heart Shift Consulting, where we cultivate choice-filled lives through heart work. I'm so happy you're here. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit subscribe and join our YouTube channel. That way you will get the latest videos as soon as we release them. And I promise we have some great ones coming. But this one's pretty good. Today we have my good friend, Meena Srinivasan, who I adore. She is a mindfulness expert. She is an SEL expert. She is an author. She is an entrepreneur. She is a mother. She has a restorative practice lens. She keeps equity at the center of her work. She supports teachers and leaders. She does all things. She is the person to go to problem solve, to strategize, to make sure what you are doing in the world of SEL is meaningful for kids. And I am overjoyed that she gifted us with her time and her treasures. So if you haven't done so already, take a notebook and a pencil out and be sure to write down all of the wisdom that she is about to share with us. My friend, Meena. Meena!
Oh my goodness, Corey. It's so good to reconnect with you.
I mean, it is bringing me so much joy to see your face. I don't think I can.
SEL soul sister.
Exactly.
Can you be an SEL soul sister? I think so.
I think we are. Like, if you end up with a t-shirt that says that, don't be surprised.
Let's make those t-shirts.
And wear them together. Absolutely.
Perfect. Yeah, that would be awesome.
So Meena, clearly I am already in love with you. We met back when you were with Oakland Unified, an SEL initiative that not only focused on social emotional learning, but embedded restorative practices and had a focus on equity before anyone else was talking about equity. You guys were doing the work of, meaningfully connecting to kids. So I know this about you, but there's a possibility that someone's watching this video that is not already one of your biggest fans. So why don't you catch everyone up? Just tell us about your journey to SEL and being a part of that team at Oakland.
Sure. Well, I just want to say the feeling is mutual. And when I met you, and you're a Bay Area native, so when we talk about, Oakland engaging in this equity work right from the start, part of that is that culture of the Bay, and why we knew that we couldn't do SEL, and in fact our definition had an equity lens like back in 2012, before people were really understanding that you can't do SEL without holding an equity lens. And so we had that connection right from the start, and obviously kindred spirits with the work you're doing in Atlanta, which is such an important city when we think about the transformation that's needed now in our country and really in our world. So just a little bit about my journey. So I am a lifelong educator. And when I was in the classroom, social and emotional learning was really the foundation for teaching and learning. And, back then we didn't know it was called SEL, right? But really, SEL is good pedagogy. And after several years in the classroom, one of my mentors, Linda Lantieri, who I know you know very well, who co-founded Castle, was like, they're trying to hire for this position in Oakland and they haven't been able to find the right person. And I think it's time for you to transition out of the classroom. So I had this wonderful opportunity to be part of the Collaborating Districts Initiative, which you were a part of, which essentially started with a research question. And that question was, all right, we know we can implement SEL at the school level, but can it be done in a complex urban school district like in Atlanta, like in Oakland? And so we both got to be part of that community of practice, really trying to figure out, how do you do this systemically in a place as complex as the other districts were, like Anchorage and Austin and Chicago. And one of the things that I really saw through this experience, which was just such a powerful learning experience for me, because my job was to really focus on secondary, on middle school and high school, is that there were so many resources out there for elementary, but there was kind of a dearth of resources for middle and high school. And really saw that in the other collaborating districts as well. And that led me to write this book, SEL Every Day, Integrating Social and Emotional Learning with Instruction in Secondary Classrooms. And that was really born from kind of my boots on the ground learning in Oakland. Because, one of the challenges we have with secondary, right, is we have our secondary teachers who are often driven by content. And not to say that content isn't very important, but it's like, how are you teaching that content?
Right.
And so the book was really focused on some of my main takeaways around the importance of prioritizing SEL integrated instruction and really dispelling this false dichotomy between SEL and academics. And after 5.5 years of this really exciting, innovative work in Oakland, I got to connect with Linda Lantieri again, and we co-founded this organization called Transformative Educational Leadership, which is a year-long leadership experience. And our first cohort was 40% leaders of color. Our last cohort was 60% leaders of color. And what we really aim to do is kind of create a community of awakened leaders that are committed to this work of social and emotional learning. But I'm just get real with you for a second, Corey, because I know that we're like on the same wavelength. I feel like the term SEL doesn't do justice to the work that needs to be done in our schools. And so I'm thinking of this more as like a healing centered approach, and sometimes SEL feels a little too can feel a little corporate or even anemic, like the life force isn't there, the energy isn't there in it. And so the work we're trying to do and tell is to really create a community of leaders who are deeply committed to transforming their schools into more compassionate and equitable spaces for all kids, but understanding that that outer transformation can't really happen without that inner transformation. And so really cultivating sort of the inner life. So I'll just pause there. We could go on and on talking about a lot.
There was so much in there, and I'm going to go back to secondary in a second because I think that's really important. But we're right now focused on leaders, and I'm just so thrilled to hear that is your work currently, because I feel like SEL in its broadest implementation has a strong focus on classroom teachers specifically. But you and I have been in schools where if the leader doesn't prioritize the work, it does not happen. Mm-hmm. Every school has outstanding teachers, whether they know the acronym SEL or not, that believe in whole child education and supporting children. But the school-wide, the systemic, the full-on breadth of what SEL can be does not happen without committed leadership. So your intentionality around reaching leaders and them deciding the vision for how they want to be in a school, how they want people to feel and interact and commune in a school is really important. How did you land there? How did you and Linda love her, love Linda Lantieri. How did you guys decide this is what we're doing? We're going to on leaders.
Well, I want to also bring in Daniel Reckstoffen, who is another colleague of us, and the three of us, co-founded this in 2018. It really came from, I'm sure, what you were just saying, that, what we realized on the ground was that implementation was ultimately ineffective unless you had leadership that really embodied these social emotional learning competencies. And so I've always felt, particularly when we're talking about transformative SEL, that we have to do that deep inner work of really looking at our beliefs and our biases and understanding just how colonized we are, right? And so, and that also connected with this commitment to, really ensuring that this space of awakened leaders had a significant amount of leaders from the global majority. And now we're global majority with our last cohort being 60%. But to not have it be exclusive for leaders of color, because, and I think you're familiar with this research, and it came out in 2019 from RAND, that 80% of our school principals are white identified, and close to, I think it's over 50% of them felt that their pre-service program did not adequately prepare them to support students of color. And more than 50% of our students are students of color. So we need to support the white leaders too in being able to advance equity in their ecosystems. And so we really believe in like the beloved community, and it's hard work. It's not easy, but unless we attend to our inner lives, that outer transformation is not going to be what it's really more than, oh, here's the policy, here's the procedure, but it's not the transformation that I think we actually really need, that can come from like a shift in consciousness. And I think SEL at its best, when you're really doing that deep cultivation of self-awareness, is about that shift in consciousness.
So let's go back to secondary, because I can envision this pot bubbling with all the things that make school that much more challenging, right? You have a developing brain that's still figuring itself out. You have students with that developing brain shifting from focus on teacher acknowledgement to like peer relations. You have this overemphasis on catching kids up, right? Because whatever behind metric they're looking at seems to be amplified when you get into those middle school years. And then you have the schedule that does not always allow for connection and community and relationships. So it's kind of like if there was a road with speed bumps, this would have all of the speed bumps, right? Like all of the possible speed bumps. So you decided to focus on secondary. How did you come to that decision, and what are your gems? What are your gifts for this particular really difficult part of schooling when it comes to social emotional learning?
Well, thank you for that question. And I'd say first off, it is the hardest nut to crack is how you do this in secondary. And it really came from, the inspiration to offer the book came from just seeing like there was a gap. And perhaps I could offer some tools and resources that can help bridge the gap for those who are ready. And the first thing that I wanted to just lift up is that we know that in secondary, I mentioned the content, but just the structure of it, right, as you were speaking to, doesn't always make it conducive to prioritizing SEL. And it's also like a mindset shift that needed to happen, because we can teach content through community. So it's not community over content, it's community through content. And so, or content through community. And there are so many different strategies that have been identified as being optimal for secondary, but the one that I want to just dive into today in our short time are the 3 signature SEL practices, which actually were born in Oakland and have now spread like wildfire.
Yeah.
And
yes.
What they consist of are a welcoming ritual, an engaging practice, and an optimistic closure. So I'm going to just go through each one and then talk through what are the elements that need to be in place for something to be a signature SEL practice. Because I've had folks be like, oh, it's like a do now. And I'm like, it is not a do now. And so I want to kind of like break it down and go through. So the first signature practice, welcoming ritual. Essentially what that is an activity at the start of class that intentionally connects everyone to the work ahead. And so it's a check-in, a community builder, but I want to emphasize it's connected to the work at hand. So there are many ways you can do this. And what we know from research is that when you get students talking at the start of class, or really anyone, when you get them talking at the start, they're more likely to stay engaged throughout. So we want to make sure that we create an opportunity for folks to be able to transition in, connect with each other, but maybe connect with each other in a way that is also connected to the content that you're going to be exploring that day.
That is so important, Meena. I know you said it 2 times already. I'm going to say it a third, being connected to what's coming. So often I walk into a room and the teacher has a greeting like, how was your weekend? Or tell me your favorite color, or something that is not at all.
Yeah. And then they're like, now let's do the work. Now let's do our math problem.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah.
It's a completely missed opportunity to really show that academic SEL integration to prepare your kids for what's coming, for them to be excited about, the day. Yeah, absolutely. But what it takes, what you're saying and not saying, is planning.
Yes. And so that's the key when we think about integrating SEL in secondary. To teach with SEL in mind, you have to plan,
Yeah.
and it takes a little bit of effort, but once you're more intentional about it, it pays off in dividends, right? And we know that when you prioritize SEL, you're going to have less behavior issues in class, right? Students are going to feel more engaged. I love the term academic engagement that comes from the organization Engaging Schools, because I feel that secondary SEL, what it really is creating the conditions for academic engagement. So, with that welcoming ritual, we're setting the tone and inviting participation. And so the second of the SEL signature practices are engaging practices. And this is really, I think of it as like the how of teaching. And there are a variety of different engagement strategies that encourage participation. So it could be like Socratic seminar or philosophical chairs or World Cafe, but these different ways in which we teach content, but through a way where we are making connections with each other and with ourselves. And this is key because this is how we learn best, right? Like we learn when we are an active participant, and when we can like pause and make connections and really anchor our learning. And the other thing I want to lift up there with the engaging practices is something that also comes from Engaging Schools called the 30, 90, 10. And what that means is every 30 minutes, having students move for 90 seconds and having them move 10 feet if possible. We are not meant to be sitting, particularly if you're on like a block schedule and you got kids for like 90 minutes or more.
Right.
We got to get them up. And so a lot of these engaging strategies involve getting up, moving around, right? Rotation stage. I mean, there's so many of them. And you and I both know about the playbook book, which was first created in Oakland, that now Castle has, it's open source. And I'm sure folks can contact you to get a copy of it.
But I can put a link absolutely into this video. But when you were talking, you know what I was thinking? I'm so happy for the teacher listening that is making connections to other things that are already in place, because Avid has these same teaching strategies, right? Like you mentioned, Engaging Schools, they have these teaching strategies. Like this is not new. This
Hell
is
no. Yeah. No.
the best of what's already out there, right?
Yeah.
And so that takes a little bit of stress. Like I
Yes.
could in my pocket be already integrating SEL, but I need to do so intentionally because
Yeah.
there's so many programs that are introduced and we kind of get fatigued with the newness of it all. But the best of them really are related examples of social emotional learning.
Completely, because it's good pedagogy, right? And like
Yeah.
you are so right. This isn't something new. You are likely already doing it, and we just need to be more intentional. And the
Yes.
one thing the playbook will do is that it makes concrete connections to those 5 core SEL competencies that were developed by Castle. So the last signature practice is an optimistic closure. And this is like my favorite, because when I was teaching, so often I'd like just end the class and be like, oh my gosh, the bell.
Yeah.
But the optimistic close is thoughtfully finishing with an activity that honors the work and helps us look ahead. And it's a time to celebrate, motivate, and think about next steps. So some of my favorite examples of this are like the 2-minute accolade, where you set a timer for 2 minutes and you have a couple prompts. It could be like, what I learned today, who I appreciate, or one that went viral on Edutopia, which you may want to link. You probably know about the appreciation apology, aha, right? So it was one of the 60-second Edutopia strategies. And I love it because it shows a secondary classroom. It's a 1-minute video. And you just see how easy it is to just leave a little bit of time to thoughtfully close the space in an honorable way. Now, I want to also just reiterate that the 3 signature practices, there's a few key elements that I feel like when I'm with a leader and doing a walkthrough in a school where I want to really help them understand, here are the things you're looking for. So like the look for is when you're looking at it, whether or not something is a 3 signature practice, one of the 3 signature practices. So there needs to be individual think time, right? We know we need to give kids time to process. And we know that some people process better, orally, or they need to write, whatever it is, we need to give space for the individual think time. So that's number 1. Number 2, there's purposeful social interaction. So this is really key because when I've been in some schools and folks are like, oh, I did the welcoming ritual, it was a do now. And I'm like, well, did kids connect with each other? Was there purposeful social interaction? Or, there's been this, and this is a separate conversation with you and I, just the kind of explosion of mindful awareness practices in school, which have their place,
Right.
but connect with folks differently depending on context, and is not a substitute for something like a welcoming ritual, where there's this purposeful social interaction. Some folks, and particularly if we're holding a cultural lens to this, they need to talk to feel like they have arrived. I know in my community, like, we need to engage. We need to acknowledge, I'm here. How are you? And if
Yeah.
we don't do that, it just feels off. It feels a little funky. So again, that piece around purposeful, and the key word there is purposeful social interaction, is really important. And then finally, we said this before, but we're going to say it again, connected to the work at hand. So again, individual think time, purposeful social interaction, and connected to the work at hand. And those are the 3 things that I look for to really determine if something is indeed one of those 3 SEL signature practices.
Well, I'm going to add to yours, Meena. I'm
Yes,
going to add to
add,
this
add.
there. So
Yeah.
with purposeful think time, I would like to add visual representation of what's being asked. So many times we
Yeah.
focus on auditory instructions and learning, and your visual learners are not able to really process what's happening. So having visual representation, and also a connection to a writing tool. Our brain makes so many more connections and ability to focus and process when kids can journal or just simply draw while they're thinking, if that's appropriate for them. So I love it when teachers allow for that type of learning. And the other thing I want to add to your list, which you are already saying, but I just have to say it out loud, is that we are focusing on student voice in all of these 3 signature practices. That when we have the welcoming ritual, when we have the engaging portion of the middle of the day, that the student voice is primary and the teachers end up taking a step back. We guide and focus, right? We lead, but we let students come to their own conclusions, develop their own opinions, connect with each other, finish their own sentences, start their own sentences, right? Like, truly speak and practice what it is to be in community with other people through their voice. And we start being quiet, which is so hard. It's so hard for us because we want to say so much, but really important in an SEL classroom to just facilitate from the most quiet of possible places. I think you'd agree with me.
Oh, for sure. And I think what you just shared is actually aligned to the research that we have on SEL in secondary, which we know you can't just scale up like an elementary SEL program. It's about student choice, student voice, and really creating opportunities for students to enter in the way that works best for their learning style. And so I love that you added those pieces. Like, this is we got to work together more, because here it's like you're enhancing, my, like, here are the 3 things. Like, actually there's a bunch more. But the last thing I want to just share is, when we really look at like what makes a successful secondary SEL classroom, one of the indicators is the percentage of teacher voice versus student voice. And
Yeah.
the student voice has to be not just like the majority, but majority by a long shot, like 30-70, 20-80, and we don't get there unless we do things like create the container, right, for that kind of instruction to happen, where it is really done in collaboration with each other.
And it's safe.
and it's safe. And so taking that time, particularly at the start of the school year, but it doesn't end like, I'm sure you've worked with schools who are like, oh, we're gonna do the first 6 weeks, we're gonna do community circles. And like, and then what
Right.
happens,
Right.
right?
Right.
So the 3 signature practices are a way to build and sustain community, but we absolutely have to take that intentional time at the start of the year to create the conditions for safety.
And just to arc that, because if I'm on a semester block, right, and I'm changing kids in the middle of the year, so it's creating community each time I have a new set of kids, right?
Yes.
And having a leader that allows me the time to do that.
Mm,
The leader
yeah.
that you work with saying, I know this is a priority for our school. I know my teachers need permission from me particularly to take the time to connect. And so when we have a family coming together, that they're able to take the time needed to get to know each other. So yay. So I feel like the people watching this video are a little bit cheated because you have so many gifts and you have so many talents, and we're like touching like iceberg's not even enough of an analogy on this one. Like there's just so much that you have to offer to the world. And so I obviously will put your website link to this video. But if people want to connect with you, learn more from you, follow you, what are your handles? Where are you?
Oh gosh, I'm so bad with social media, but I would just say my website has a bunch of free resources. So definitely check that out. I do have a course, which was kind of like my offering to the world of everything I learned in Oakland before we started Transformative Educational Leadership, or TEL. And I'd say that if you are, that our program isn't just for school principals or superintendents, we have teacher leaders, because in many districts, teacher leaders are actually leading a lot of the SEL work. So to check out teleadership.org, we have another cohort that is starting this summer. And it is a really powerful experience. So yeah, my website and teleadership.org. And Corey, I just think the world of you, and you have so many gifts. And like when I first met you, I was just like, yeah, she's one of my peeps. And not just because you're from the Bay, but I think you understand that this SEL work is really, it's about our individual and collective liberation. And at least that's why we're doing this work. It's not just so, kids behave. That's not at all what we're doing this work. It's so students have agency, and that we're able to build a more compassionate and equitable world. And I feel like that has to be the North Star for why we ultimately do this work, not just because it improves academics, like it does, and there's research that supports that, but there's almost this like moral obligation, I feel, especially now that we have to really prioritize this work and prioritize it in a way that holds that. I even think like equity, just the word is not doing justice to what we're talking about, but really holds that liberatory lens.
It's almost overwhelming, the possibilities, right? I just have I have such a full heart about what you and I are both doing to improve the lives of so many people. I was at a training and I was asking teachers to talk about themselves in a way that was congratulatory, right? Like as a part of a self-awareness exercise. And there was this, this shyness that came over, and so many of them were like, well, I don't want to brag, or I don't want to toot my own horn. And I just stopped and I said, but that's the exact world that I want to create, where everyone is so full and happy with who they are, that we get to celebrate each other all the time. Because when I am my full, happy, whole self, I connect to you as a happy, whole person. There is no competition. We get to all be full together, right? So how do we create a space where our human people, our big human people and our little human people are full of possibility and joy and self-righteousness in all the best ways, right? Like that we have these floating people. I just see this world of floating people. You and me.
It's rippling. It's rippling. I
Yes.
know you have a son and I got a son, and we want them to grow up in that world and all their friends. And really, I think we do this work for with that long view of the, like my Indigenous grandmothers talk about the 7 generations. And so I'm so glad that we got to connect through the CDI, and now we're off doing other exciting work, but really it's parallel work. And the more people we have, teachers who are listening, the more people we have that are prioritizing SEL in this way, that's the only way we're going to actually create the world that you were just talking about, with the full, happy, whole persons out there.
Yeah. Well, we can do it. And I'm so thankful for you. Thank you, Meena, for your time,
for me,
for your gifts. I will put all of the links and all of the things so people can follow you and learn from you and connect with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for doing this YouTube channel. I know there's so many educators who are going to appreciate it. And thank you folks for tuning in.
Yes, absolutely. Have a great day.